Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. Have you ever wondered why you keep attracting partners who cannot seem to commit or open up emotionally? In today's episode, I'm going to share the surprising ways your own emotional walls, and in my case, it was like the Great Wall of China, might be magnetizing exactly the type of unavailable partners you are trying to avoid. It was something called the mirror effect or the chameleon effect. What I discovered about this mirror effect changes how everything about how I understand attraction. And it might be just the wake up call you need to break this pattern for good. Welcome to Intentionally Single, Seeking But Not Settling. I'm Lauren Jean, your host, integrative wellness coach, and hypnotist. Each week, we explore mindset shifts and mind-body strategies to help you live life intentionally single and content while remaining open to possibilities. Unlike typical dating advice, we focus on personal fulfillment to attract genuine love. Join us to transform unconscious patterns and embrace your intentionally single lifestyle. Stop feeling deflated by the dating world and start prioritizing the most important relationship, the one with yourself. Welcome to Intentionally Single, Seeking, Not Settling. I am your host, Lauren Jean. Today, we're diving into something that might feel a little bit uncomfortable, and that's how your own emotional unavailability might be the very thing attracting emotionally unavailable partners into your own life. Let me take you back to a pattern over 10 years ago I noticed in my own dating life that honestly took me years later, maybe 10, 15 years later to understand. I kept meeting guys who seemed great at first. They were successful, charming, seemingly interested in dating. But a few weeks or months in, the same thing would happen. They'd start energetically pulling away, becoming less available, less communicative. I spent way too much time blaming them, wondering why I kept attracting these commitment phobes. I had no idea that I was part of the problem. One day, during a self-hypnosis session outside my front lawn, this was during the pandemic when I had a ton of time on my hands, this is when I started to look at everything in my life that triggered me. Once I had some time off from my job, and I realized that I was in a very emotional spot at that moment. I had just been through a breakup, and I had this time to really dig into myself. So I decided to do that. I revisited a few scenes from my past dates that struck me really hard. I realized that I never wanted to be involved with any guys that I had dated briefly. I'm talking like maybe one date or a couple or maybe a month. I was telling myself that dating is what I wanted, but deep down, I didn't. At first, I was confused at these scenes that were coming up, and I could feel the disappointment and frustration just kind of like bubble at the surface. What came to me is that I was emotionally available. I had a very hard time believing this. Me, emotionally unavailable? No. I was the one who wanted more connection and more commitment. But as I dug deeper in my hypnosis sessions daily, I did this daily, I started to see how my own subtle patterns of keeping people at arm's length were actually attracting partners who matched my own level of emotional availability, even though I wasn't even conscious of it. This was way in the beginning, right where I started digging into my own issues that I had pushed under the rug for many, many years. This is about 2 years after I started diving into hypnosis, and I hadn't done a whole lot of work on myself, but I did a lot of work with other people. I did some self-hypnosis here and there, but again, I said I had all this time on my hands. So this realization was both uncomfortable and very liberating because it meant that I finally had some control over the patterns because I now understood where they came from. They no longer had control over me because I had the power to now change it. And I continued to work on this daily on the lawn in self-hypnosis with my journal, with my AirPods, and today we're going to explore how this, what I shared early, mirror effect works. why it happens, and most importantly, how to start fresh by being aware of your internal patterns. So, when we talk about emotional unavailability, we often think we're the ones trying to connect with someone who won't let us in. But relationships operate on a principle of emotional resonance, which means we attract and are attracted to people who match our own level of emotional availability, even if you're not conscious aware of it. And even if we have these walls up that we have no idea are up, it's like these invisible walls. Most of the time, we are unaware of it. It's part of that 40 million bits of information stored away by the unconscious mind. This happens because our nervous system is constantly scanning for what feels familiar, mind roll. If you grew up learning to keep your emotions contained, or if past relationships taught you that emotional vulnerability leads to pain, you've likely developed these subtle patterns of emotional distancing that feel completely normal to you. And your conscious mind might be saying, I want connection, while your unconscious patterns are actually pushing it away. Sound a little bit like you? Let's get more into this. So let's discuss some science behind the mirror effect so that is more understandable and relatable to everyday situations and dating. And you can take this into your life and start to apply it. So, you know how you sometimes catch yourself copying someone else's gestures or expressions without even thinking about it? That's what scientists call the chameleon effect or the mirror effect. Basically, it's our natural tendency to mirror the people we're talking to. Think about it. When someone smiles at you, you'll probably smile back automatically, right? It's just something that we do without even realizing it. And sometimes we just think it's polite. This mirroring thing is actually pretty cool because it helps us connect with others. When we unconsciously match someone's body language or way of speaking, it makes both people feel more comfortable and in tune with each other. It's this connection that we have. It's like a silent way of saying, hey, we're on the same wavelength, or I get you. This happens a lot when we're in new situations, like during a job interview or on a first date, where we're really wanting to make a good impression. Something interesting scientists have found that when people are really clicking with each other, even their heart rates and physical responses start to sync up. And get this, people who are naturally more empathetic tend to do this mirroring thing more often. While some people, like salespeople or counselors, might consciously try to mirror others to build trust or rapport, and it works best when it just happens naturally. It's really just part of how we are wired as humans. It's this unconscious way we have of bonding with each other and building upon relationships. And it's pretty neat when you think about it and when you start to notice it in your everyday life. Start to pay attention more to the people that you're talking to and just see if this mirroring effect is actually happening to you. And then you can start to notice it even more and you can start to build better relationships with those around you. So, when it comes to dating, this mirroring behavior can be super interesting to watch in action, like I just said. Think about those first few dates when you're really into someone, and you might find yourself naturally leaning in when they lean in, or maybe you're using similar hand gestures without even thinking about it. It's like this invisible dance of body language that happens when there's this attraction. You want to be more like that person, you want to connect more. And therefore, your mirror neurons, which are in your body, they start to actually get you to do this unconsciously. And scientists have found some pretty cool stuff about this. When two people are hitting it off on a date, their physical responses start to sync up, like I mentioned earlier. Their heart rates match, and even their skin's electrical response, like when you get those nervous butterflies in your stomach, all that stuff aligns. It's like their bodies are unconsciously saying, hey, there's something here, there's attraction. And both people feel it. This physical synchronization often makes people feel more attracted to each other, which makes sense when you think about it. We tend to feel more connected to people who seem to be in tune with us. But just like with any aspect of dating, Trying too hard can backfire. If someone is obviously and intentionally copying everything that you do, it can feel really weird and awkward or even manipulative. The magic happens when it's natural and unforced. You know the great dates where the conversation just flows and you find yourself laughing at the same things and everything feels effortless? I've had many of them. That's often when this mirroring is happening naturally. So it's naturally in us. It does happen. And you don't have to be aware of it. However, I'm sharing you this information so that you can take this and be aware that this is happening. You will both just vibe and unconsciously match each other's energy naturally anyway. And it's not just about the body language. You might notice yourself picking up on their way of speaking or usually using similar phrases or matching their energy level. Maybe they're speaking softly and thoughtfully, and you naturally lower your voice too. Or they're maybe very animated and excited, and you find yourself matching that enthusiasm. It's all part of this natural process of building connection and chemistry in the early dating stages. When someone is emotionally unavailable, this mirroring effect can actually reveal a lot about what's going on beneath the surface, their internal dialogue. You might notice that their mirroring behavior feels inconsistent or a little bit off, like they're physically present but not quite emotionally synced up. I know I've been there. Think about trying to dance with someone who keeps missing the beat, and it's kind of like what that feels like they're just not there. Their mind is somewhere else. With emotionally unavailable people, you might spot someone telling patterns. They might mirror your physical movements and expressions in the moment, but their emotional mirroring fails flat. For example, when you share something vulnerable or exciting, they might smile or nod automatically, but their response doesn't quite match the emotional depth of that moment. It's like they're going through the motions of connection without actually letting themselves connect. They're putting some sort of wall or some sort of invisible boundary. These are signs to pay attention to, not just in them, but also in yourself. Start to notice if you are feeling emotionally, I'll say, detached. This disconnect often shows up in your body language and their body language too. So while they might occasionally mirror your gestures or your expressions, their overall body language might remain closed off, crossed arms, leaning back when you lean in, maintaining extra physical distance. Maybe they're looking off in the distance or over your head while you're trying to speak to them. And even when they do mirror your behaviors, it might feel mechanical rather than natural and flowing. You can also notice they break the mirroring pattern quickly, especially when conversations start getting more personal or emotionally intimate. They really want to pull back then. What's really interesting is how this can create a confusing dynamic. Sometimes they mirror perfectly and create these moments of seeming connection, only to pull back and become emotionally distant again. This inconsistent mirroring often leaves the person feeling uncertain or off balance, like they're getting mixed signals. Nobody likes mixed signals. It's similar to have a conversation where sometimes the other person is totally engaged and other times they seem to be looking right through you. Like I said before, their physical presence it's there, but their emotional resonance is missing. One of the trickiest things about emotional unavailability is that it often masquerades itself as self-sufficiency or high standards. So let's talk about some signs that might indicate you're unknowingly contributing to this pattern. Maybe you pride yourself on being independent and not needing anyone. That was me, totally me, I admit it. While independence is healthy, if you find yourself wearing it like armor, like protection, I don't need anyone, you might be using self-sufficiency as a shield against genuine connection. So another thing is you're attracted to a potential rather than reality. I'll repeat that again. You're attracted to potential rather than reality. Again, I have totally been there. When you constantly fall for people who could be great if only they would change, you might be unconsciously choosing partners who aren't fully available because it feels safer than risking real intimacy. Maybe you keep people at arm's length through subtle sabotage. We talk a lot about sabotage on this podcast. Maybe you work long hours. Maybe you maintain an incredibly busy social schedule or take days to respond to messages. These behaviors might feel normal to you, but they're actually creating this emotional distance between the person that you're trying to get to know. Remember how in the last episode we talked about how your subconscious mind processes 40 million bits of information per second? This comes to play in attraction too. Your nervous system is constantly scanning for partners who match your own emotional wavelength because that feels safe and familiar to your brain, even if it's not what you consciously want. When you're emotionally unavailable, you're sending out subtle signs through your body language, your tone of voice, and your energy that attracts similar unavailable people. It's like speaking a secret language of unavailability that your conscious mind does not even know that you're fluent in. All right, so the first step in changing this pattern is developing emotional self-awareness. I don't know why I said awareness. This means starting to notice your own patterns of creating distance. I noticed this big time in myself. Like, I don't actually want to be there. It's almost like I am holding myself back because it seems like this person might be a good person, but I really don't want to pursue anything further. Do you find yourself pulling back when someone starts to get too close and too excited? Do you use humor to deflect conversations, or do you find yourself protecting your heart in other ways, perhaps putting up that wall? Do you keep your schedule so packed that there's barely room for a relationship? Do you make excuses constantly when someone wants to hang out, finding every reason in the book not to see them? Yep, I have been there. I say if you really wanted to, you would figure it out. If you really wanted to see that person, you would figure it out. The key is to start small, guys. You don't have to suddenly become this open book. Instead, try experimenting with small moments of vulnerability. It can be scary, of course, but try it out. Maybe that means sharing a genuine feeling instead of an intellectual observation. Or maybe you're letting someone see you when you're not at your best. Maybe you're not wearing makeup. Maybe your hair isn't perfect. Maybe you are wearing a different outfit that you would normally feel comfortable going out in. These are small steps that you can help to rewire your nervous system to tolerate more emotional intimacy. Your current patterns of emotional unavailability likely developed for very good reasons. They served a purpose. Of course, they served a purpose. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been there. Maybe you learned early on that it wasn't safe to be emotionally open. Maybe you felt like you weren't protected. Maybe past relationships taught you that vulnerability leads to pain. We often have relationships, if not like 100% of the time, we have had relationships that have led to pain. They're not character flaws. They're survival strategies that helped you at one point and they served a purpose, but they're not serving you anymore. Understanding this helps you approach changing these patterns with self-compassion rather than judgment. You are not broken and you're not doing relationships wrong. You're just operating from old programming that you can now choose to update. So, I know this was kind of a shorter episode, but I really wanted to get down to the point here. If you recognize these patterns in your own life, and if you need support in developing greater emotional availability, I'm here to help. You can DM me on Instagram at the Girl with the Vine Tattoo, or you can reach out in email and we can connect. You can learn more about my coaching programs and my hypnosis. You can reach me on email at intentionallysinglepodcast@gmail.com. And please, if this episode spoke to your heart, please come over to the Facebook group where we can get to know each other personally. You can just search Intentionally Single, Seeking, Not Settling, and it will show up in your groups on Facebook. Join it as it grows. It's still a new group, and I can't wait to have you there. As for next week, I'm still working on the topic idea, and I have a really good idea that's not set in stone. But I'm feeling the desire to write an episode on how you speak to yourself and how that affects everything in dating. And language is a big piece. Language is something that we need to communicate with. And communication can really get broken up in relationships and even in your own head. So I don't know the exact idea, but I am leaning in that direction. And I have some really good ideas, which again, I'm not going to share right now, but it's going to be a really good one. So let's see what my brain conjures up. But for now, I just want to thank you again for tuning in to the podcast. I am Lauren Jean again, reminding you that becoming more emotionally available does not mean becoming vulnerable to everyone. It means learning to be selective about who gets to see your heart. Keep growing, keep learning, and please always stay open to possibilities. I will see you next week.